The TeraFlex JL 2.5-inch spacer lift combines easily installed spacers with the factory springs. The kit contains all the necessary parts and hardware for installation. The rear spacers are 2.5 inches tall, and the front spacers will differ in height depending on whether you drive a 2-door or a 4-door. This is because of weight differences between the two vehicles. We will show the installation on the passenger or right side of the vehicle, but both sides can be done at the same time. Raise the vehicle in the air and remove the wheels and tires. Remove the front sway bar links. To disconnect the sway bar link from the sway bar, you will need to use a combination of an 18mm wrench and a 6mm Allen to keep the stud from spinning. An air gun will also make quick work of it. After both sway bar links have been removed, swing the sway bar up and out of the way. Remove the bolt connecting the front track bar to the axle. Disconnect the brake line from the bracket. Doing so prevents the brake line from being stretched. Discard the bracket, it will not be reused. Remove the axle actuator plug by pushing in the locking tab. Remove any zip ties or plastic clips connecting the line to the upper control arm. Disconnect the breather hose on the axle. On the Rubicon, there is a locker actuator plug that you will also need to disconnect. Loosen, but do not remove the control arm bolts. The front upper control arms have a heat shield on the frame end. Move the heat shield out of the way or remove it if you want to. Support the axle and remove the bolt on the axle end of the front shock. Raise the vehicle or lower the axle until the springs are loose. Be aware of the brake lines, ABS lines, and any other wires. As much as possible, avoid stretching these. Remove the spring and then remove the spring isolator. There are 2 locating pins on the spring isolator. These fit into corresponding holes on the front spacer. Likewise, the front spacer has 2 locating pins on top, which match the 2 holes on the spring bucket. After the TeraFlex spacer and factory spring isolator are properly aligned, set the spring back into place with the front bump stop inside the spring. Be sure the bottom of the spring matches up with the spring index. Using the provided tool, tighten the bolt and nut for the bump stop. Lower the vehicle or raise the axle back up into place. The spacer and the spring isolator can fall out of position. Make sure they align correctly. Reconnect the shock. Install the new front sway bar link. Reconnect the breather hose, axle actuator plug, and any plastic retainers you removed. It is alright to reinsert the bolt for the track bar while the vehicle is in the air, but do not tighten the bolt until the vehicle is back on the ground. Moving to the rear, loosen but do not remove the control arm bolts. Remove the emergency brake cable bracket located on the vehicle body directly above the rearmost driveline joint. This bracket will not be reinstalled. Pull down on the emergency brake cable and clamp a pair of locking pliers onto the e-brake eyelet. Disconnect the e-brake line from the eyelet. Leave the locking pliers in place until the e-brake line is reattached. Disconnect the e-brake line from the axle. The connector has 3 tabs that don't press in easily, so use pliers here. Detach the e-brake lines on both sides before proceeding. On vehicles with pre-installed lockers, the locker actuator wiring is connected to the e-brake lines. Detach the brackets, and you can remove them from the wiring. You will not reattach these. Feed the cables up over the cross member and fuel lines. These cables will now travel underneath the cross member and fuel lines. Reattach the e-brake cables in reverse order, first to the axle and then to the eyelet. Finally, remove the locking pliers. Make sure the cables don't hang down below the axle. Disconnect the track bar at the axle. Support the axle and remove the bolts connecting the lower end of the shocks to the axle. Remove the sway bar links and move the sway bar up out of the way. Detach the breakline bracket from the axle. Lower the axle and remove the spring and spring isolator. To install the rear spacer, set the bolt into place using the slotted washer. Install the spacer. As you tighten the nut, make sure the locating pin aligns with the hole in the upper spring mount. Torque the nut to 15 foot-pounds. Align the locating pin on the isolator with the corresponding hole on the spacer. The spring isolator has an index to align the spring. Be sure you do this before setting the spring into place. Install the new rear sway bar links. Reconnect the shocks. Reconnect the breakline brackets. Insert the track bar bolt, but do not tighten until the vehicle is back on the ground. To install the rear bump stops, place the mounting plate onto the axle bump stop bracket. Two holes on the mounting plate line up with holes on the axle bracket. Use these to attach the mounting plate using the provided hardware. Place the rear bump stop onto the mounting plate and insert the mounting strap into the slot on the bump stop. Insert the hex cap bolts and lock washer from below and screw them into the mounting strap. Replace the wheels and tires, and once the vehicle is back on the ground, torque all the control arm bolts and track bar bolts to factory specifications.